Hello everybody, my name is King and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a long one, so I hope you enjoy this one. And also for those who do not know yet, there are links to support the channel, whether through Patreon or buy me a coffee or even buying my book on Amazon, because I am a student and these kind of things do help me quite a lot. So I do appreciate any support, but without wasting any more time, enjoy the video. I was called by a lady who swore that her cat was possessed. I was incredibly skeptical, but very curious. According to the lady, her cat would suddenly start screaming at the top of its lungs. It would do this crazy looking slow motion walk while tilting its head at weird angles. If she tried to approach it when it did these things, it would lash out at her with its claws. After having one of these spells, it would hide but not relax. Its tail would swing wildly and it would growl to itself for up to an hour. As strange as all of this sounded, I spoke to one of my team members, who is very sensitive. After hearing the story, she insisted that we investigate. We arrived at the residence around 4:30 p.m. The lady gave us a tour of the house and introduced us to the cat. It was a standard ranch home, and we found nothing creepy about it. The cat was cool, very affectionate, and really took to my fellow investigator. She spent a couple of hours alone with the cat while I got the paperwork and formalities done with the lady. She invited us to investigate the home that night as she had a date, then worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift at the local hospital. She left for her date around 7:30 p.m. and we began our formal investigation. We moved room to room asking questions in hope for an EVP, or at least a knock in response to a question. We had no activity until 11:30 p.m. The cat started screaming in the master bedroom. Upon entering the doorway, my partner grabbed my shoulder, stopping me, and motioned finger to lip for me to be quiet and listen. It was hard with the cat screams. They made my hair stand on end. As we watched and listened, a shadow began to form in the corner of the room. There was a whisper coming from the shadow that was not recorded by our DVRs, and we could not understand what it said. The cat was irate. It was scared and ready to fight. So we witnessed the claims of the lady firsthand, and they were exactly as she had described. My partner spoke very calmly to the shadow, saying, "You are scaring the cat. I don't think you mean to, so if you leave this room and go into the bedroom across the hall, we will help you." We turned and entered the small bedroom and sat quietly on the bed waiting to see what would happen. A few moments later, my partner grabbed my arm and pointed at the doorway into the spare bathroom, shared by the two smaller bedrooms. I could clearly see a humanoid shape with no features, but it was blacker than the dark. The teammate and I had worked together many times and had a routine that we followed. I told the entity that everything was okay, the cat was calm now, and we want to know how we can help. It slowly moved through the doorway and slightly into the room. At that point, I heard through my DVR the word kitty. While recording, I always plug in an earpiece so I can hear what is being recorded in real time. I asked if it was trying to pet the kitty, and it stretched out its arm, pointing toward the master bedroom where the cat was. I asked if it wanted to hurt the kitty, and almost immediately heard a sigh and whimper. I asked again if it wanted to hurt the kitty, and stated that in order for us to help, it needed to answer. My partner told me a minute later that it answered. She sensed that it indicated that it only wanted to pet the cat. She also sensed that it was the spirit of an adolescent male, and she thought that in life he had some type of developmental issue. While we spoke, the entity seemed to sway slightly back and forth, but it did not go anywhere. It seemed that it was listening to our conversation. I once again spoke to it, saying that it had scared the cat, and if it wanted to pet it, that it would have to make friends with it. I explained that if it would just sit still and speak to the cat, that it would learn that you don't want to hurt it. Eventually the cat will come to you and let you pet it. A moment later the cat appeared in the hall doorway and sat down calmly. No one spoke or even moved, including the spirit. A few moments later the cat joined us on the bed. I spoke to it calmly, and my partner scratched its neck and head. As I looked back up from the cat and the spirit, I noticed that it was gone. We experienced nothing else that night and locked up the house and left. 2 days later, my teammate called me very excited. She had researched the property and found that a young man who had Down syndrome had died on the property when he had fallen out of a treehouse. We gathered our evidence and met the lady the following day. I played her all of the recordings of us talking to the spirit so that she would understand what exactly happened. When she heard me tell the spirit how to make friends with the cat, she began to cry. She told us that only that morning the cat was on the bed in the smaller bedroom. It was purring very loud and moving its head like someone was scratching it. I, 20s female, will start with a little background. I grew up as an only child. My parents had my sister when I was 11. Before she was born, my dad rebuilt our bungalow into a huge 2-story house. Hence, no one died in my new bedroom. Now, onto my experiences. The ages are around estimates. I'm mid-20s now. When I was around 7, I started getting nightmares about the concept of death. I would wake in the middle of the night crying for weeks on end, and then it would stop for a while before starting again. By the age of 10, this developed into a feeling of being watched, being unable to sleep, and being convinced something, not someone, something, was watching me from a specific corner of my room. My new room, the one my dad built. My dad eventually ripped that section of the wall out to show me that there was a space there. I don't remember why, but there was a space all the way around the upstairs. He tried to turn it into a fun den area for me, but I hated it and wouldn't go in there. This continued when I was about 12. I got my first smartphone. The iPhone was my dad's old one, but it worked fine. That was until it got dark outside, and the phone would start typing random letters when I was texting someone or typing. This only ever happened in my bedroom. As soon as I went out of the room, it stopped. I told my dad. He said it must be damaged, and he bought me a new one for my 13th. He believes in ghosts, but couldn't explain what was happening in that room he built. The new phone did the same thing. I thought I was going mad. I bought some spell candles from a witchcraft museum when we went on holiday. I was around 14. I used them to politely ask whoever or whatever was there to please leave the house peacefully. This worked, and I was perfectly okay in that room again. I slept fine. My phones were all fine as I upgraded and got new ones. I moved out when I was 20. I went to visit my parents and stayed the night in my old room. Whatever was there when I was a child is back there. The same corner, the same feeling, the same dark energy, the same creature. Except now, I have an image of it burnt into my memory despite never actually seeing it. It's a dark creature. It has some type of human shape, but very muscular, and it crawls around on all fours, legs bent behind it. Almost wolfish, but without a snout. It snarls and glares, dark red eyes with big black pupils. It has horns as well, big horns carved back over its head. There's some type of red tinge to it, but I can't identify where it comes from. But there you go. That's my story. Believe me or don't. It doesn't matter to me, but I don't go in that room anymore when I see my parents, not even in the daytime. I moved into my house in June 2018, so roughly the next winter, I was sitting on my couch with lights off and my cat in my lap. After a bit over an hour of watching some stand-up comedy, not caught in the moment of a scary film, my cat's head popped up. He did this turning his head toward the door to the house in our kitchen as though someone was there. While staring for a while, he gradually turned his head as though he was following someone walking through the living room. At the exact same moment, the lights in the room that had been off the entire time started flashing on and off for about 10 seconds. Like any brave manly man, I began calling my wife and telling her to come to the living room. By this time it had stopped, so I explained to her what had happened, and again it happened. She grabbed the remote for the ceiling fan, saying this is why the button was stuck on one side. This had never happened before or since, and the remote hadn't been touched for over an hour. So what influenced this chain of events to occur as so? Well, my pessimistic wife had her own recent ghost experience the other night. This happened around 1:30 a.m., roughly when she heard a creaking noise in our room, opened her eyes to see a person she believed to be wearing camo and the dogs running out of the bedroom. At that moment she grabbed her glasses and immediately searched the house to find nothing. And here's the best part of the story. Our 3-year-old a few days prior, while it was just him and I, were in the kitchen and told me Grandpa is eating cereal. My neighbor's dad, long past built and lived in our house, was an avid hunter, and my sons call the neighbor grandpa. I've never met or seen the neighbor's dad, but I imagine he resembles our neighbor a bit. So we've had numerous paranormal experiences in our home, from voices whether audible to ear or through spirit boxes, seen shadows, footsteps, everything you can think of, we've witnessed. But this one specific time is the first time I personally have truly felt what it was like to be frozen with fear. We kept seeing a child's spirit standing on the stairs. He would walk up and down, and then just stand and watch. There were no features, he was just a dark silhouette. So I decided to sit on the floor directly underneath where this child was standing. That's when things got scary. I all of a sudden couldn't move. I was that terrified, and I hadn't even witnessed what was happening. My fiancé saw this child's silhouette rise up and become, as she described, a male adult. We have always felt child spirits were something a lot sinister, and this certainly verified it for us. I have never felt fear like it, and I have had experiences since I was a kid. The story I'm about to tell is not one I personally experienced, but one told by my father, who experienced it firsthand many years ago. He went on a coon hunting trip one autumn night with his uncle and a family member of theirs. For those who don't know what coon hunting is, it is hunting raccoons, usually at night, using a scent-hound bird for that type of thing. It was common in the southern United States, and that's where this took place, in a remote rural area in the southeastern US in the late 1970s/early 1980s. It should be noted that a good trained coonhound never leaves a raccoon. It tracks and corners up a tree. My uncle had 2 fully trained, reliable coonhounds with an excellent hunting record. On this particular night, the 3 men each had a light source. One had a carbide lamp, another had a brand new flashlight with brand new batteries, and another had a lantern. The location they chose to hunt in was an area my uncle had been in many times. It was truly a remote area, far removed from civilization, and was one of the most beautiful wilderness areas one had ever seen. It was located near a national park. That night they drove a little farther out than they usually did, and they let the dogs out. It didn't take long for the dogs to track down a coon. The men followed the dogs, and had to walk quite a bit off the regular paths this time. They ended up well outside the usual area. It was an area my uncle was not familiar with. They found the dogs at a very large tree situated on a cliff. There were no other trees around it, and they could hear the sound of water flowing in a creek beneath the cliff. The strange thing about the tree was the stone that was sitting beneath it. My dad said the stone resembled a gravestone, the way it was positioned upright just below the tree, and the way it looked. It looked almost as if it had been placed there. As soon as the hunting party reached the tree where the dogs were, the dogs suddenly went silent and walked away from the area, in the direction from which the group had just come. My uncle noted that the dog's behavior was uncharacteristic of them, because they had never walked off like that when there was a coon in a tree. My dad thought it was odd as well. He said he had never seen them act that way. It was as if something had spooked them. Baffled by the dog's behavior, still they decided to look to see if there was a raccoon there. My dad leaned against the stone and shone his light up into the tree. There was no raccoon to be found, which again was highly unusual. If there wasn't a raccoon, what were they chasing? As soon as my dad leaned against the tree and shone the light into it, their friend's carbide lamp suddenly went out. My dad said that as soon as their friend uttered the words, "My light went out," the other 2 lights simultaneously went out as well. Alone in the woods and completely in the dark, a feeling of uneasiness settled over the men. My uncle, who was a logical-minded man, calmly stated, "There's probably a reasonable explanation for what just happened. We need to all remain calm. Let's just step away from here and make our way back to the jeep." So they headed back the way they came. About a half mile to a mile on their way back, the lights came back on, as if nothing had happened. They found the dogs a little farther down the way, nearer to the jeep. My dad never went back there to hunt again. What is interesting to note is this particular area is near a well-known area of the park, where lots of people through the years drowned in the river there. It is purported to be a haunted spot. There have been ghost sightings and all kinds of strange occurrences in that area. It's possible that they wandered into the park, near that very spot where some unfortunate soul drowned. First experience was when I was maybe like 2 or 3 years old. I'm 19 now. I was sleeping in my room and I suddenly woke up to a pitch dark room. I was afraid of the dark at the time, so I was scared, but then I saw a tall shadow on my wall and it disappeared after I blinked. And the next day I told my dad about it, and he said, "What did it look like?" I told him it was tall and looked like it was wearing a hat. I don't remember what type of hat. My dad said my great-grandfather wore a hat like that, like the one I saw the shadow wear, and he also said my great-grandfather was tall too. My great-grandfather, the one that died before I was born. That was my first experience and also got me into believing ghosts. My dad's house is haunted by my great-grandparents, and one of them even died in my room before I was born. And we would have little experiences here and there, not much though. There would be some footsteps coming from the attic when no one was up there, and sometimes my dog Bella would start staring at nothing and start growling, then go back to whatever she was doing before. And sometimes you feel like you're being watched when no one was around. One night I was home alone with my dog Bella, and all of a sudden we heard something loud fall in the attic, and it made me and Bella both jump. I wasn't going up there because I never liked the attic. I always got a creepy vibe up there. So I waited till my dad got home so we can check it out. When he did, we went up, found one of my old doll houses was on the floor up there, and it wasn't before. It was in a crawl space behind a wall that was easy to get to. But when we went up there, it was in the middle of the room outside of the crawl space. That was weird. I have 2 great-grandfathers, one that died before I was born and the one that died in 2018 before I started 8th grade. Second experience was in 2018, right before I started 8th grade. My great-grandfather passed away. He was 90 years old, and the night he passed, I had a feeling that he was gone. And then 5 minutes later, my dad got a call from my grandma that he passed, and that night he came to me when I was sleeping, letting me know that he was alright. Third experience was the saddest and sweetest one that I had, and it was about my dog Bella. She passed in 2020 when I was 16. The day she was put down because she was old and not doing well. That night I was having trouble sleeping, and when I finally did fall asleep, I dreamed that Bella came to visit me and lay next to me, and it felt so real. I knew she came to tell me that she was okay, and I woke up and tears were coming down my face. I still miss her very much, but I know she's in a better place. I still feel her around me sometimes. Fourth experience was in 2019 in December. Me and my family went to the hospital to see my uncle for the last time and also be around him when the doctors pulled the plug. We were standing around him, and when the doctors pulled the plug, he was gone, and right after he was pronounced dead, we all saw out the window a couple of fireworks go into the sky close to the hospital, and we didn't know why. There was no event going on anywhere, and it only happened once, and the hospital didn't do it either, but we all thought it was him going to heaven. My uncle did fireworks for our town before he got sick. Last experience wasn't mine, it was my dad's. Before I was born, my dad was making renovations on my great-grandparents' home, the great-grandparents that died before I was born. And he was in the basement listening to his favorite rock station or working, and all of a sudden the radio changed and started playing classical music, which was my great-grandparents' favorite music, and my dad asked if they changed the station, and the station back to the rock station. The house my dad is moving into is my other great-grandfather's old house, which used to be a farmhouse back in the 1900s, and it also has some creepy stuff happen in there, like seeing old car headlights in the driveway but no car is there. And it is a house in the middle of the woods, so it can't be a car driving by, and the owner before my great-grandfather had some of his family funerals done in the living room back then. So every time we walk in there, it feels like you get that mourned feeling like at a funeral, and the house still has a window where people come over and look through whenever the family was having a funeral in the home. When I was in high school, my friends and I used to go to Black Snake Road to race each other. It was in a very rural area and had little traffic and was very dark. We called it that because of several hairpin turns. However, there was a perfect half mile that was marked by a bridge in one end and train track on the other. One night after several of us had been racing, I found that I was the last to leave. As I approached the bridge, I saw a girl standing there dripping wet. I stopped and asked if she was okay, and she responded that her boyfriend missed the bridge and crashed into the water. She said that he was still in the truck. I got out of my car and ran around the side of the bridge and down the embankment. There was no deep river, just a shallow creek. I saw no evidence of a truck or anything out of the ordinary. Returning to the top of the bridge, I found her standing next to my car, dripping wet and crying. There were no cell phones back then, so I offered to drive her home so that we would call the police from there. She accepted and directed me to her home. On the right, she told me that her name is Sally. Her home was directly across the street from her small church, one a couple away from the bridge. As we pulled into the driveway, she asked me to go to the door and get her mother. I knocked at the door of the dark house, feeling a little uneasy. After all, it was after midnight. By that point, I knew that I was waking everyone in the house. After a few moments, an older lady answered the door, who I assumed was her grandmother. I told her what had happened, and that Sally was upset and wanted her mother to come to the car. That is when the story got even stranger. The lady told me that her daughter Sally had been dead for over 30 years. She had drowned when her boyfriend missed the bridge and flipped his truck, trapping her inside. Surprised and not thinking very clearly, I insisted that she come to my car, which she did, slippers, housecoat and all. The passenger side window was rolled down, which Sally had done. My old Malibu had crank windows. They were a pain to roll down, and I could not reach the handle from the driver's seat. There was a puddle in the passenger seat, but no Sally. The lady asked me to walk across the road to the graveyard next to the church. We did, and she showed me Sally's grave. That incident started a 40-year pursuit of the paranormal for me. I have investigated all over the world since then, while serving in the military and my work afterward. Ghosts are real. And that's it for today's video. If you liked it, please leave a like, don't forget to subscribe, and even comment which of these stories you found most interesting. Again, just a reminder that if you would like to support the channel, there is a Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, and my Amazon link to my book if you would like to support the channel anyway. I do appreciate it. But if you have any recommendations or even stories of your own that you'd like to share with me, please feel free to contact me. And yeah, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye bye.